We're about to begin this class. We'll begin as we normally do by doing a short meditation first, and then we'll say some prayers together, and then we'll actually start the class. So please get comfortable in your seat first of all. Make sure that your back is straight and your shoulders are relaxed. And you can keep your eyes open or close them. Allow the body to breathe itself. And while the body breathes itself, allow yourself to feel the breath as it moves in the body. So there are these slight movements that take place whenever you inhale and exhale. And there is a feeling tone associated with those movements. And you are aware of the feeling tone and the movement that takes place as you breathe normally and naturally. And while you're breathing normally and naturally, Shakyamuni Buddha and his spiritual entourage appear in the space in front and above you. His body is made of golden light. And you are surrounded by all sentient beings, and you are facing the Buddha and his spiritual entourage. So you have a purpose for being here today. I want you to recollect that purpose now. And whatever that purpose might be, I want you to add to it a wish to develop greater wisdom, greater compassion, and greater skillful means to help yourself and others overcome suffering and its causes, and to deliver yourself and others into the highest state of full awakening. And to accomplish this, we're going to take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma that he taught, and the spiritual community that surrounds him. So if you'll join me in reciting the refuge prayer, we will say this 3 times together, and we'll also generate a mind of enlightenment. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I am enlightened, to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the merits I create through listening to the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. And in response to this wish of ours, lights and nectars pour forth from the heart of the Buddha, and they wash over you. They remove every obstacle which prevents you generating greater compassion, wisdom, and skillful means. They allow you to become an authentic refugee and to enter the path of the Buddha's teachings. In response to this, you generate the four immeasurable thoughts. And not only wishing that others have immeasurable compassion, immeasurable love, immeasurable joy, and immeasurable equanimity, you decide to establish all beings within those four immeasurable states. And in response to this decision, again, lights and nectars pour forth from the heart of the Buddhas and all the enlightened beings surrounding them, and they wash over you and over all the beings surrounding you. And these lights and nectars reveal these four immeasurable qualities to be the reflections of mind's nature, effortlessly manifesting. And acknowledging that you are in front of this vast field of enlightened beings, whereby we can create the merit, we're going to now recite the seven limb prayer. So reciting along with me. Reverently, I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginning this time and rejoice in the meritable holy and ordinary beings. Please remain until the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own and others' merits to the great enlightenment. And now we're going to offer a mandala to the Buddha and the field of enlightened beings. I think we're doing this with the understanding that we will provide ourselves with the resources that we'll need throughout countless lives. It'll also stop our greed and miserliness, clinging to the body, and our conceptions of true existence, that this merit is truly ours. So thinking that through the wisdom of emptiness, our body transforms into this pure land, whereby we can give teachings to others in the future, and we offer this. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned Mount Meru, 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kameryatayami. And the Buddha accepts our offering with delight and smiles at us. And we look up into his eyes, acknowledge that smile, and feel accepted and at ease. And then an emanation of the Buddha leaves his heart, moves through space, and comes to abide above the crown of our head, facing in the same direction we are. The emanation descends, entering the crown of our head, coming down through our body, and rests at the level of our heart, whereby its light begins to expand, filling your body and mind. The light goes out through the pores of your skin and begins to fill the 10 directions of space. And wherever there are beings within space, think that this light is absorbed by them and they are transformed into fully awakened beings. And acknowledge that there's no difference between yourself and anyone surrounding you. And now the light begins to withdraw from the 10 directions of space and it re-enters your heart. And you can feel yourself breathing normally and naturally. You are embodied and your body is either on a seat of some sort and you're in front of your screen. And you acknowledge that this meditation has taken place on the level of imagination and it's left an imprint upon your mind for you to attain the awakening state, whereby you be able to benefit others effortlessly and spontaneously. So allow a sense of joy to arise and then breathe in deeply through your nostrils and then exhale through your mouth. Allow your eyes to flutter open and find yourself wherever you are. Okay, so welcome everybody. So we're about to engage in this course on karma, but in particular, the activities of the 4 opponent powers during daily life. So our course lasts for 4 weeks. We have 4 classes, and our topics will include karma, meaning an action, and these actions which will require purification. We'll look at the mechanics of purification and how we can apply these 4 opponent powers when we're not actually in our sessions, meaning when we're out and about in our daily life. Now, I thought what might be helpful is if you guys help me a little. So the way I'm going to do this class today is really about karma in brief. Next week, we're going to look at purification, and in particular these 4 opponent powers, but the next 2 weeks is really about how to apply these, like I said, in daily life. So if you could you maybe send to Miffy in the chat, perhaps at the end of the class or as we're going through and you can think of something, some sort of event that you might have come into, was problematic at the time. You thought, what if we love to be able to purify that like on the spot?
So what Eddie means is just put it in the chat anytime that you like, and And when there's a few, Eddie, do you want me to read them out, or do you just want me to collect
what I'd like if you just to keep them in the last 2 weeks, it'll give me time to think and go, okay, we could do it from all these different aspects of the path. We can use all these ways in terms of the 4 opponent powers.
Right. So everyone, write what you can into the chat and I'll collate it all.
Yeah, it might have been that you went out in the morning and went shopping and you had a bad experience with the person behind the counter. Just any sort of problem, and it might not even be your own. Maybe you think of somebody else who might have had a problem, and I wonder what I could have done. How could I have used the 4 opponent powers like on the spot? Otherwise, I'll have to make up some. Of course I can, or I can rely upon my own past. But yeah, it might be really helpful if you could use something of your own. We won't say, we won't give it a name or anything like saying, oh, this was Kodo's problem. We won't do that. We'll just make it like general, right? So we'll just take that and I'll use it as a basis to work from. Okay, so let's have a look at, and so of course I've relied upon a lot of different materials. So of course I've relied upon my own teachers, material that I've heard of Lama Zopa speak of, and Geshe Sopa, and also these books here. Now there's this book here in the middle, Foundation of Buddhist Practice, and Samsara Nirvana and Buddha Nature. These have very extensive presentations on karma and the 4 opponent powers and so forth. As we go through the 4 weeks, these books will change, especially in the last 2 weeks. Because there we're really looking at these 4 opponent powers and some of the different things we can do to deal with our problems on the spot. But today, we're going to be looking at karma itself, meaning actions, and we're going to have a look at a slide describing the stages of an action, a karmic action. And then finally, we're going to be looking at the actions and their effects. And in terms of the 4 opponent powers, what we really want to do is to stop the effects of the negative actions that we've done, the unskillful actions that we've done in the past. We don't want those to come to fruition, which brings, we don't want them to become we don't want to eventuate in a negative fruition, or in other words, a fruition which is associated with suffering. Well, we don't want that to happen. And the idea of using the 4 opponent powers is to stop that actually happening.
Eddie, every now and again, can you remember to just stop the screen share so we can see you every now and again?
Okay. So let's have a look first of all at karma itself, and in particular causality and karma. So karma is an instance of the general law of causality. So what were we getting at here? We're talking about, in terms of the general law of causality, we're talking about causes and conditions producing effects. And these causes and the conditions and the effects being produced are impermanent, meaning subject to change. Now, in terms of the general law of causality, we can talk about the changes that take place within our continuum as sentient beings. We can also talk about the changes that take place that are external to the continuum, meaning all the changes that take place like around us in the universe, for instance. So that's this general law of causality covers the changes that take place in our external world and the changes that take place in our internal world, which are associated with our feelings. So what makes karma unique is that it involves actions of intention. In other words, intentional actions. And to create an intentional action, we need a person. We need an agent, someone to do it. And these actions that we engage in with intention produce particular effects that are associated with those intentions and the actions that followed. And this is what we were referring to as karma. The karma requires an agent. In our case, that agent is us. And like I said, it enters the picture when our feelings are involved. In fact, I think I remember Venerable Rabina saying that all feelings were karma. So what is it actually? So let's have a look. So karma basically is an action, and strictly speaking, it refers to the cause of an action or the origin of an action. And these, let's see, but there's two other things I should mention here, and I will, because we also call these karma. So when we engage in an action, when the action, as soon as it's finished, it leaves what they call a seed or an imprint upon the mind. So this seed is, so it's a potential to produce something else. Like I said, so it is placed upon the mind. And if you're familiar with the 12 links, it's basically the 10th link, what they call becoming. So you've created something, it produces a potential to create something else, often called an imprint or seed. But karma also refers to the effect of karma. And in fact, most people who don't have any background in Buddhist study, when you hear them talk about karma, often they're talking about karma in terms of effect. But we call these like effects of karma, would be the more precise way of speaking about it. So a karma is basically like an intentional act carried or committed by a person, something with sentient nature. And karma is often explained in two aspects. First, there's the karma that is the intention. So so just before we act, we have an intention to create, to act. But then when we act, another intention goes along with the action. And this is also referred to as the karma. And most of you will be familiar with terms like karmas of the body, the karmas of speech, and the actions of the mind. In the Mahayana, karma is always like mental. So we're really sort of focusing down here on this term called intention. So it's a mental action that accompanies the physical or verbal action motivated by the intention. So although there is a physical or verbal act, that does not constitute the karma. Instead comes the purely mental action that accompanies the physical act.
So Eddie, does that mean that it could be an identical physical action, but it would be different karmas for different people depending on what's happening in their mind while they're doing it?
Yes. So, for instance, we might speak harshly. So that would be the action. Now, the thing is, why are we speaking harshly? So there's your intention before we're about to speak. And then as we speak, as we're speaking harshly, there's another intention that goes along with that. So karma it's got these two aspects there. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche has often encouraged us to put a lot of attention on the karma before the act. You know, it's like, so when we started off today's class, I asked you to think about why you were here today. So you go, okay, so you think, right, this is why I'm here, and then like you're here. Right? And as you're here, other intentions will flow through your mind as you know, over the next 1.5 hours or so. Now, when karma is expressed, it's expressed in one of 3 ways. And 2 of them are physical. So this is the body and the speech. And the third, of course, is mental, and that's with the mind. Now, the activities that we are engaged in, of course, are many. What I want to talk about just for a brief moment is those simple ones that we are all familiar with, what they call the 10 skillful activities or the 10 unskillful activities. The 3 of body, killing, stealing, sexual misconduct. The 4 of speech, harsh speech, idle speech, divisive speech, and lying. And then the 3 of the mind, malice, covetousness, and wrong views. And so the acts, the physical acts of the body and speech are generally directed by the mind. Now, when we begin Buddhist practice, and I would suggest for a long time, it would be smart to consider ourselves as beginners, it is hard to deal with how quickly the mind acts, how quickly it has these aspects of malice, wrong views, and covetousness. So it's hard to start off there. And in fact, we're encouraged to really start working with the physical and with the physical aspects of our body and speech, and to try and start off by just restraining ourselves. Like, just don't do these activities. Maybe over time we can become good at that, and then we can move across and start dealing with the mental activities that are actually driving the physical activities. These are malice, covetousness, and wrong views. Okay, so what I want to do now is to bring up an act, right, a karmic act, and we'll look at it, and then what we're going to do is break it down. So I want to start off with the simple action of stealing, right? Also called theft. Right? So in the Buddha Dharma, this is described as, or defined as, taking something that's not freely given. And when we do that, this action can be described in a number of different ways. I'm going to do it the 2 simplest ways, but I want you to know that it can even be extended and then become more sort of complicated. So the first way to look at it is that we begin with the intention to take something that does not belong to us. It's not freely given. Then we take it. That's the action. And then when the action is completed, we actually know that we've taken it and we're probably pleased to have it. Now, the intention to take something. It could be driven by malice, greed or covetousness, or just ignorance itself. So here we have these three actions of mind about to drive the physical activity of taking something that's not been freely given to us. So I think this is quite a very simple, simplest way of looking at it, right? There's always an intention, the action follows, and then the action finishes. But within this simple diagram, there's a lot more going on. So we could have it describe it sort of 4 steps, 5 steps, even 6 steps. So I want to have a look a little bit, break it down a bit more. So in terms of this intention, which is could have hatred, ignorance, and carelessness or ignorance involved. Now we have 4 parts to it, right? So when we take something that has not been freely given, we have to take it from an object or a person. So that's the basis. This basis also contains within it that's it. Now we come to the next one called the attitude. And it's within the attitude that we have the intention, the correct discernment, so that we actually, correct discernment is getting it. So if I wanted, suppose the basis was Miffy, for instance. I'm going to take something from Miffy that I've not asked her for. So she's the basis. My attitude has to be, is this one where I go, okay, so I'm certain that I'm correct discernment means it is Miffy that I'm going to take it from. It's not some other student at the center. What's driving me to take that action is, in this case, we could say it's greed. But it could also be, it could be ignorance or hatred.
So Eddie, if you take my morning cup of coffee, it could just be greed that my coffee is better than your coffee, or it could be like ignorance. Would the ignorance be that you just thought it was your coffee?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, and what else is there now? And the motive. What's my motive for taking that coffee?
Well, I could give you the benefit of the doubt and go, oh, because you want to lead a good class.
There you go. Thank you. Actually, I have your coffee. That's right. I want to stay awake. That's right, and lead a decent class. And of course, I actually take the coffee. This is the performance. So I'm taking it. I didn't ask Miffy for it. It wasn't freely given. But I just took it. And it culminates in the fact that I've got her coffee sitting right here in front of me. And I have the coffee. And so these are the parts that make up the action of stealing or theft, where we take something that's not been freely given. Now, within these parts of the action, so if all the parts of the action are completed, it brings about a complete result. But the result can differ widely. And that is the width of difference really depends upon, like, not only what the intention was, but how strong was the intention. In terms of the basis, was like, who did I take the coffee was? Was it from Miffy or was it from Rinpoche? Because it makes a big difference. All right. And as you'll know, of course, the attitude is completely different too, isn't it? You know, like I just take it from Miffy, but then I take Rinpoche's coffee. You know, like I just make a mistake. I thought it was mine, but I took it from his. Or else I might go, oh, Rinpoche's coffee, special coffee. I want special coffee, and I take it there.
Yeah, I heard sometime like ages ago where someone actually took, I don't know if it was Lama Zopa Rinpoche's mala, but one of the Geshe's malas, because they thought, oh, it's going to be super charged with blessings, so they stole it.
That's right. Oh my God. Yeah. And basically, you know, this really demonstrates, you know, we don't really know what we're doing. We want to be happy, and yet our actions drive us further away from it. We don't want to suffer, yet our actions bring us ever closer to suffering. And that's really the importance of knowing about karmic action and what we can do about it, which we'll talk about later. Now, so when I was thinking about this, you know, so if you so how this action is done, depending upon the strength, the weakness, and so forth, sometimes even the size, the basis, this can all bring about different results. I'm just trying to think of what I could do here. I've got quite a number of different examples here. So if the action is performed with great strength and strong emotional content, and the basis is one of great importance, these can produce rebirth results called, and the rebirth result is called a fruitional result. If the actions that we have created are unskillful, then the result will be rebirth in the lower realms. So this is what we want to avoid. However, although all the parts might be in place, if the activity is not done very strongly, the basis is not one of great importance and so forth, it does not need to lead to a rebirth result. It does not necessarily bring about a fruitional result. Miffy, you have your hand raised?
Oh, yeah, so there's a question here from Susan. So why would it be worse to take Rinpoche's coffee? Perhaps she agrees with Shyla, it's worse to take Miffy's coffee.
And because, why is that? Why is it worse to take Miffy's coffee rather than Rinpoche's?
Well, I was thinking, like when Shayla said it's worse to take Miffy's, like as a joke, that perhaps because I would be more overtly upset. Jordan's asking, does it all come down to intention? If you take Miffy's out of spite compared to taking Rinpoche's out of mistake?
Yep. So that's so the most important part thing is the intention, but the basis also plays a part, a major part actually. With especially here, if we're all looking at Miffy as being, you know, the what can I say, the SPC, which he is, but we're looking at Rinpoche as being an enlightened being. That's a big difference. It's the same sort of thing if you do in worldly life, you commit a crime against an ordinary citizen and a crime against the prime minister or a dignitary of the country. The results are much worse if you do it against the dignitary than the ordinary person. And it's the same in terms of spiritual results.
Is it to do with the results being worse for us, or the results being worse for the
for us, the person who creates the act, who is acting, not for the other person. This is our stuff.
So this is really an inner story, because even though I might be upset about losing my coffee and Rinpoche wouldn't be, it's more heavy taking it from Rinpoche because the effect on the perpetrator's mind.
That's right. So here we're talking about the doer, right? Not who is done to.
So Angela's kind of asking about this. So can taking Rinpoche's coffee have a greater negative impact on more people? For instance, Rinpoche's tired and doesn't give as clear a teaching as he would have.
This is about us. It's, of course, it's about us. We're looking about us here, right? The actor. So just focus on us as actors.
So we're actually not looking at the external action so much as the action happening in our mind.
Yeah, karma is mental.
Mental, right. See, this is confusing because I know this, and yet when it comes to the action, it's always...
I know, we keep looking out there.
Yeah, we keep looking out there.
Looking at the objects. Michael, yep. Michael has his hand raised.
Yeah, so I have, so what if, because Miffy always has these beautiful, many colored coats on, and I'm visiting you guys there, and I know that Miffy has 2 coats, but before I walk into the center, I see somebody who's outside and cold. Without asking Miffy, I take one of her coats and give it to somebody.
That's right.
So the intention is to help, but I've still taken something that's not been freely given.
That's right.
So
So one result here would not be a fruitional result. That would not have the power to produce a fruitional result of rebirth in a lower realm. So most of our actions are mixed. However, so that still remains true. When you want to do something negative, when you want to do something seen as unskillful, these are nearly always complete. When we try and do something good, they're often mixed up or something's missing. So remember, this whole thing will be about trying to purify. So we don't need to purify good acts, right? We want to leave those alone. We just don't want to harm the good stuff we've done. So try and bear in mind that this is really about focusing on the unskillful activities that we will have done and what we need to do to prevent the unfortunate outcomes through the use of the 4 opponent powers.
So Eddie, when you're saying an action being complete, you mean, say, for instance, with these stages within a karmic action, that all of them are there.
Yeah.
So that it was intentional, not accidental, and the culmination or the completion, like all of it's there. That makes it a complete.
That's right. But so it's all complete. All the parts are there. However, just because all the parts are there, I'm just putting out here, it doesn't mean to say that even though the action is negative or unskillful, it does not mean to say that that activity will now produce a fruitional result in the lower realms. Because of the strength that's involved in the type of negativity, what the basis might be, and so forth, how it was performed, and even if the action was culminated and finished. So I was thinking sometimes when I'll give you an example, right? So the basis will be Miffy, and what I'm going to take from her without being asked from her is this coffee that she's made. The attitude that I have is one of greed. But suppose, like I said, I know it's hers, so I take it. I actually take the coffee, I drink it, I put it in, and it's like, oh, I don't like it at all. So no joy. Right? So there could be lots of intricacies involved in each of these stages. So I want to bring this up because we're going to move next in our discussion here shortly will be this thing of the results, because that's what we want to stop in terms of the four opponent powers. Does anybody else want to say anything, or is this sort of reasonably clear to you? Is there something unclear then?
Susan.
Yeah, I still don't, I'm hung up on this. Why is it worse to take Rinpoche's coffee than Miffy's? For one thing, Miffy seems very enlightened to me, and she could be more enlightened than we realize. And for another thing, what if Rinpoche has a big stock of coffee and Miffy doesn't have any except a little bit, and she has no money to buy more? Why is it worse than to take Rinpoche's coffee?
I've just, sorry, my screen has just gone funny. I've just got to get it back.
Eddie, you're sharing. Just stop share.
Stop share.
Down the bottom, the green. Yeah, that's it.
So, okay, well.
So the difference between stealing Miffy's coffee or the Buddha's coffee. Eddie, you're sharing the wrong screen. You've got to share the.
I know that I'm trying to get.
Yeah, I'll come in.
Right thing. Yeah.
Eddie, click stop share. And then click share. And before you click OK, pick the screen that you want to share. There should be two different screens. There should be 2 or 3 different screens you can share when you first say share screen.
That one. Share. Go to from that one. Yep. Then hit enter. Or click to get the next things up.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so once again, so Susan, so what you've done here is like I said, brought in all these I'm going to say the other aspects of it, like the strength, who it is that we take from, why it was taken. This is what makes the difference, right? So, but here we're talking about the basis. Right? So the basis is the person. So now think of it. Is there a difference between stealing something from an enlightened being and stealing something from an ordinary being for you, the person who steals? So this is why we get all these warnings in the text, don't we? Like Rinpoche is always saying, we don't know who a bodhisattva is. We do not want to take or harm bodhisattvas, because the harm that comes back to us is much greater than it was an ordinary sentient being.
So Eddie, it's almost like there's two things happening here, which might be what Susan's kind of alluding to, that there's the external action to do with, say, maybe Miffy needs a coffee more than the Buddha, but that's not the karmic thing. The karmic action is the the result in our mind from doing the action.
No.
No?
So Susan, if you use that example and go, so Susan, how about you use an example, right? But that's not quite correct with you, because if you use that one, then this goes, what's the attitude driving you to take the coffee from either yourself or Rinpoche? It could be the very same attitude, right? But the person, that's different. The basis is different. Susan, what was your example again, please? You're having you're having difficulty here about the basis, weren't you?
Yeah, I was thinking it's sometimes hard to judge who is more enlightened. You know, I mean.
Yeah. So imagine, okay, so harming a sentient being compared to harming an enlightened being, what do you think would be the worst for the person who does the harm? Like if we killed an ant, right? An ant is a sentient creature. We don't suppose, not an ant, a cockroach. Let's take something we don't like, right? A cockroach. So we have this cockroach there. That's the basis. We don't like it. So we have aversion. We kill the cockroach. But there's no complete action. Then we have somebody like Lama Zopa Rinpoche or perhaps the Bodhisattva, somebody who's really on the path and trying to help everybody. We don't like them. We kill them. Which is worse for the person who does the killing of the ant, or the person who kills the Bodhisattva or the religious person?
Well, it's worse to kill a human than a cockroach.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So that's the difference in basis. Right. So it's the same sort of thing when we go to a sentient being and a being who's on the path. It's worse for us to harm the person on the path than it is to harm the sentient being who has no realizations.
But Miffy is on the path.
Yes,
I
but
can
not as far on the
categorically
path as
say-
somebody like Lama Zopa Rinpoche, for
That's
instance.
right. Categorically say I'm not like Lama Zopa Rinpoche.
Mm. So does that make it a little clearer for you? Remember, we're just talking about the basis here, Susan. This is the basis, right? When you come to these other things that you brought in, that's really about the attitude.
You know,
No,
but
it's
we
not
don't
like
really know who the person is that we're judging to be inferior
Yes,
to Rinpoche.
yeah, that's
we
right.
don't really know that person. We don't. How can
Yeah,
we judge that person?
And that's why Rinpoche says, and we should, knowing that, consider all people. Since we don't know, we should take the attitude, then they're all bodhisattvas. Right? So that we don't harm any of them. Like so, yeah. So remember here, this is the effect on ourselves. We're talking here about ourselves as the creators of the karma, the creating. We are acting. Right? So when we act, then it's like we're going to take something. In terms of the stealing one, we're going to take something away from somebody, something that doesn't belong to us. So we could take one of Miffy's jumpers, one of her robes she's got around her neck. We go, okay, so, and we take that without asking her, that's stealing. Right? And there's a karma consequence for us. And we say, why? Because I want it. Now we might say the same, like you gave the example about somebody taking Rinpoche's mala, or and going, why? Because I want it. So the action is the same, but the basis is different. And that has an effect on our future. The consequences are different. Anyway, think about it. We don't have to sort of like accept it, but the basis does make a difference. So in relation to these actions, the Buddha says, possessed of my own deeds, I am the inheritor of deeds, kin to deeds, one who has deeds as a refuge. Whatever deeds I shall do, whether good or evil, I shall become the heir of it. So this is like a sort of a you can say like an admonition or a warning in a way, but also like to have deeds as a refuge. When we take refuge in the Buddha Dharma Sangha, we take refuge in the three jewels and become a Buddhist. You say, okay, so what do we do now? What's the most important thing that we should do as becoming a Buddhist? And the answer, of course, is work in harmony with Buddha's presentation of karmic cause and effect. Because like we said, whatever we do, we become the heirs of our actions. We inherit the consequences of actions. So we become the heirs of the consequences of our actions. So the consequence of an action, of course, is just called a result. It's another term for it. And there are basically three types of result. And these karmic results correspond to the ethical nature of the action, which has been primarily determined by the intention that motivated it. So we said before why intention is so important. And in fact, in some ways, intention and karma are the same thing. So actions done with good motivations bring these agreeable results, and actions done with sort of destructive motivations bring miserable results in the long term. So these are the, as I've said, there's three, but actually you can break the three down into four. And it's sort of important to do that. So we have what they call the ripening result. And I'll go into each of these very shortly. We also have what they call the causally concordant result. So that's the second, but it has two parts to it. There's a experiential result and there's a behavioral result. And finally, there is the environmental result. So you can see these actions can bring several different forms of result. Some can be immediate and some can ripen later on. So let's have a look at each of these in a little bit of detail. So we're going to look first of all at the ripening result of a destructive action. And these are called, like I said, the results of fruition or fruitional results. And there are three different levels. This ripening result refers to the rebirth ripening. So the action that you've done in the past, its consequences to find yourself reborn somewhere in some form. So to have that happen, you've got to have all four parts of the action complete, and it's got to be powerful enough to do it. So you can be reborn as an animal, as a hungry ghost, and if the result was greatly destructive, you find yourself reborn as a being in one of the hell realms. And as you can see, when you look at the material on the hell realms, there are a lot of them. And so, again, you can see that all beings don't go into just one hell realm, but they're going to like 16 or so different. There are 16 different ones, I think, something like that. And you can go from one to the other. And this really depended upon how that first destructive action was done. You know, each part of it, what was it strong here? Was it weak there? Was it a little bit of regret here, and so forth? And what was the basis? So this ripening result to take place, here, of course, that the cause is non-virtuous. And this result relates to the continuum of the sentient being. The result will always come after the cause. The result itself is called a neutral.
Why is that, Eddie?
Well, to do that, we have to talk a little bit, we have to go back a bit. Well, I'll just say it now. So except for the causally concordant behavioral result, all the other results are neutral. So does anyone know what a causally concordant behavioral result is? Does anyone remember, or? We'll come to that shortly if you don't remember.
Eddie, is that what you...
Eddie, I'm just thinking like so you're saying it's a lower rebirth ripening,
Yep.
say as a bunny in headlights.
Yep.
But it's neutral.
Yep, that's right. Ethically neutral.
Oh, ethically neutral. Okay.
Yeah, ethically
right.
neutral.
I think there was another question as well. I can't see who's here because oh, hang on. Someone else had a question too.
Mm-hmm. Is it Alicia?
I was just going to ask you, Eddie, you asked what the behaviorally causally concordant result was.
Yeah.
Is that where you have tendencies that are in line with previous negative actions?
Yeah, that's right. It's when your behavior is just like the cause of the previous behavior. So
yeah.
For instance, when we did the one about stealing, right, taking something that was not freely given, we find ourselves doing the same thing again. The behavior is the same. Right, so that's not neutral. That's negative. That's a non-virtue. I remember Rinpoche saying one time, of these four, that was the worst. So I was sort of shocked. Huh? You know, but then thinking about it in reading, I go, oh, of course. We do the same things that cause ourselves problems again and again. Our behavior is the same.
So that makes it a self-perpetuating thing. Whereas if it was just that we had our stuff stolen, that might then just be the end of it. Yeah,
that's right. So that's what it's called, like this. It's in terms of, it's called ethically neutral. So that when we have something stolen, because you could behave badly or you could behave well. Isn't it? Like that's not a cause for us to behave badly again, not necessarily. It could be something that really kicks off our spiritual development. Let's have a look at some of these causally concordant results. So like I said, there's two types of results similar to the cause. And these are the results corresponding to the experiences and results corresponding to the behavior. And these two pictures have to do with a presentation I did on sexual misconduct. But we'll talk about the stealing one first, then we'll come to a few other examples. So an experience corresponding to the result, the concordant result of taking something that is not being freely given, is that we find ourselves in poverty. So we've taken this, so these results here have really to do now, we haven't taken the lower realm rebirth, we've taken rebirth as a human being. But we find ourselves living in poverty, or we find our things often stolen.
Eddie, just stop the screen share while you're telling us this story.
I'm not going to tell a story, I'm just going to give you some examples. Or that we find that we have objects, but we don't have any power to use them. And results corresponding to the behavior of taking something that's not being freely given, what do you think that might be? Anyone?
Is
Heather?
maybe I had an affair in my last life, and so this life my lover or husband has an affair?
No.
Oh, behavior. Oops.
In terms of
Bye-bye.
the sexual misconduct one, it would be that in this life you have another affair. Your behavior is concordant with what you did in the past. So remember here, it's got to come back to us.
Concordant just means similar. So
So-
the behavior is similar.
Is this the strengthening the habit that you were talking about, Eddie,
Yeah.
where it's like, okay, I've stolen that coffee and now it's like, I don't think much about stealing another coffee and then another one, and it
That's
just
right,
keeps,
or a car or
Yeah.
anything else. So we just get into the habit, the behaviors, the habitual behavior repeats itself again and again.
Mm,
Yep. So that in terms of the stealing, that's what it would be like, Angela.
mm.
We would continue to take things that were not really given.
It's almost like, I don't know, reminds me of like compounding interest. It's just getting, it runs better and better. It's getting worse and worse.
Yeah, it does. And that's why the Rinpoche was saying that's why it's the worst of these four.
Mm.
But we keep the behavior. So is this that little part sort of sensible to you? Make sense? Okay. Let's go back. And in terms of the sexual misconduct, it would mean that we would continually engage in sexual misconduct. If it were harsh speech, we would be speaking harshly again and again. It's the simplest one of all, really, isn't it? The behavior continues. It is similar to the previous action. And these, so what have we done? We've done the causally concordant result, and we did the ripening result or the fruitional result. And now we have one final result called the...
So experiences, hang on, Eddie. So you've done the one of behavior. The behavior is like the compounding interest, but the experiences, that's just a much more simple result, isn't it? Of it just happens back to you. The results corresponding to the experiences. So would that be that I'm always losing my coffee?
Yes, that's right. You could often lose your coffee or not even have access to coffee. And so not in Miffy's case, but in my case was I took her coffee. So in the future, I would find myself bereft of coffee, or that when I have coffee myself, somebody else takes it. Or I've made the coffee, I go to get it or something, and I go to pick it up and it falls over. I knock it over instead. So I've got it, but I find I can't use it. So all sorts of obstacles come in the way of tourism. We're having the experience of enjoying a coffee. And this just goes across from all of those 10 behaviors, whether they be killing, sexual misconduct, harsh speech, idle speech, divisive speech, and lying. Are there any other questions, anything else anybody would like to raise here? Is it sort of reasonably clear to you the difference between the behavior should be sort of simple to us, straightforward. The experiences, often you need to often have a look at the different texts there to see what sort of things could come up. So like for so for instance, so suppose we use we're a person who's familiar with using harsh speech. What would be the result corresponding to the behavior? Anyone?
That you would harshly again to other
That's
people?
right. That's right. We'd speak harshly again. In this life, we'd be familiar with it and we'd be speaking it. We would use our speech harshly. So our behavior is similar to our past behavior.
And the experience then, is it sort of ethically neutral in a way? Because if somebody speaks harshly to you, you can sort of go different ways with that. You can just, brush it off or not get involved with it. Or you could, start speaking harshly to other people and do some really silly things.
So, well, what's our experience here?
The person speaking harshly to you because you've done it in the past?
That's right. So we are insulted, we are blamed, we are criticized. Even when we speak with good intentions, others can misunderstand us. We hear unpleasant words, unpleasant sounds, even though there might be no intention to speak unpleasantly to us. In fact, it might be right speech from the other person, but our experiences, it's unpleasant. And so that's the experiential side of it.
So it's because of the past life of having spoken harshly that this life I now hear things as harsh speech.
Yeah, we hear it as an unpleasant sound.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, others could well insult us or speak harshly to us. That's also the case. Yeah. But even if they didn't, we could easily hear harsh sounds,
right.
Harsh speech, even though it wasn't actually spoken to us.
And that's because in my last life, in karmic last lives, I spoke harshly.
That's right. In previous lives,
okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
You created
Thank you.
harsh speech. That's right.
Mm.
Yeah.
But Eddie, I have a question. If we're just
Sure.
misinterpreting how we hear it,
That's right.
maybe it's not harsh speech to other people. We perceive it. Maybe we're
That's
just
right.
being delusional. How do we
That's
know
right.
it's, how
That's
do we
our
know we're not being delusional as opposed to its actual karma that came in from the past life?
So our experience is that we could hear unpleasant speech, harsh speech, even though none was actually spoken to us, none was directed to us. So that's our experience. And so when you said about deluded, yeah, we are deluded. That's what that's one of the consequences of it. Like these negative actions are coming out of delusion.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. Okay, let's go on to the environmental result, the last result. So in terms of our So this environmental result, first of all, so it manifests as our external environment, our possessions, but also how we relate to them. So in terms of the stealing example, we find ourselves in a place that's very poor, but might not have very many resources. So, as you know, there's plenty of regions around the planet that are just like this. Even in a wealthy city, there are areas where it's very, very poor. And in these places, a lot of danger. Other ways of describing it, in fact, is that we find ourselves in a country or an area that experiences either great drought or flood. In fact, natural disasters are quite predominant. So this is a sort of, we find this is the environmental result of taking things that have not been freely given to us in the past, as you said, Kodo.
So Eddie, that's becoming more and more of the world now, is there
Yeah.
desertification and floods and fires and
Yes, and if you look at human history, humans have done that a lot, haven't they? Taken things that have not been freely given. Throughout history, we've just taken countries, we've taken the resources, greed driving it, but behind the greed, the ignorance of karmic cause and effect, and also the ignorance presenting things to us as if they truly exist. And this environmental result, again, it's best to have like a text. In fact, the book, The Foundation of Buddhist Practice, that I had up there at the beginning by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thupten Chodron, has an actual chart in it that describes all the environmental effects and all the experiential effects.
Eddie, Susan has a question.
Yep, Sue?
So are those environmental results, aren't they group karma, like collective karma?
They can be, but not
widespread,
necessarily.
as opposed to individual karmas.
They can be both. Like, for instance, we can find two people living in the same area, and one person, and in fact, a good friend of mine came back from South Africa, and I said to him, "Oh man, that's the city that he was in. That's one of the murder capitals of the world." And if I was there, I would be like on guard. And my Phil said to me, "I never ever felt afraid there." So individually, obviously I've got more stealing karma in my background than he does. But in terms of, like you say, a general thing, you could say, yeah, Susan. So generally, a lot of people find themselves in a very poor place.
Would that also, Eddie, account for if, like when there are floods, not everybody gets flooded? You all go through the experience of floods, but some houses get it and some don't.
And some don't, yeah. And so in general, yep, but individually, it can differ. Kodo, yep.
I have two questions. Could you type out again the name of the book you just mentioned, please, in the chat? And another one is, well, what about white supremacy? I'm in the US.
Yeah.
And what about white supremacy and racism? I mean, that's hurting a lot, millions of people, and a system of keeping people stepped on, basically, not even giving them a chance.
Sure. So
what's that about?
If you look what's driving that, it's certainly no knowledge of karmic cause and effect, and also the grasping at the appearances of things to be true.
Yeah.
And of course, it's bad outcomes. bad outcomes. So Miffy, the book is called The Foundation of Buddhist Practice. I'll just hold it up, Kono. It looks like this. I don't know if you can see it okay.
Like, it's too small. You have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
make
Okay.
your screen big.
I'll put it up on the chat, don't worry.
Yeah,
We'll
okay.
put it
Thank,
in.
thank you so much. That's great.
Okay, we'll just put that up. And so it looks like this, but it's by the Dalai Lama and Venerable Thupten Chodron, The Foundation
Thupten.
of Buddhist Practice.
Thank you.
And
I've
this is
put
a
that up in the
wonderful,
chat.
wonderful series of books.
Thank you.
Okay, so now with these we say unfortunate outcomes. We can avoid all of them. And the way we can do it is through the application of what they call, these 4 opponent powers, which you're going to be talking about in our, next week, and then how to actually apply them on a day-to-day basis. So today, what we've really looked at here is, that we know that there's a general law of causality. Anything that's produced depends upon causes and conditions to bring about the effect. Right? That's the law of causality. And the causes and the conditions and the effects themselves are impermanent, meaning subject to change. Now, when we engage in, like I said, those negative actions, those unskillful activities, the results will be in harmony with the causes that produce them. But because they are causal, they are subject to change. And this is where we can use the 4 opponent powers. We can actually change the effects. If we do not do something to change the effect, then we get the effect. But if we have something actually that we can use to change the effect, and we use it, the effect can be changed. You know about these 4 outcomes, the 4 karmic results. There's the fruitional and the environmental and the causally concordant. And like 3 of them are neutral, but the results corresponding to behavior are not. They could be, in our talk, they'll all seem to be unskillful, negative, holding us back from happiness and so forth. Of course, as well as that, we've looked at how an action can be broken up into 3 parts or 4 parts. So before we dedicate our merit, our effort to sort of at least listen to it and try to contemplate and put it into action, are there any final questions that anybody would like to ask?
Yes, I have a final question.
So, yep,
Hi. Yeah, I have a background sort of Catholic, not overboard Catholic, just sort of. And one thing that always puzzled me is like, okay, 2 people are in a war, they're fighting on the front lines. One person gets shot, the other one lives for no particular reason. And the family of the person who lives thinks, oh, God was on our side. God was there with our loved one, protecting him. He lived. What about the other person? Why? I mean, that always seemed to me as an unchristian point of view. And it has some parallel with, I don't know, I just can't help but see some aspects of karma having that same deterministic viewpoint. Like, well, this person deserved it and that one didn't. In a way,
Okay.
it comes down
Yeah,
to
so-
that. You know?
So you've got to leave out the word deserve. You know, like I said, so when we talk about, like I said, there's different ways of talking about karma. What we need is, like I said, is another example. Right? So if you put two seeds of similar type in the earth, right, and one you water and look after, and one you don't, what would happen?
The one you look after is going to thrive, and most likely, and the one you don't will not.
Will not, right? Now, it's not the case that one deserves to thrive and one deserves not to, is it? It's just an outcome, isn't it? It's just an effect. Because the conditions were provided, one thrived. Because the conditions weren't provided, the other doesn't.
But it seems to me that the condition of the soldier that got shot was being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yep, that's right. So it's not that he deserved to be shot then, was it? Or that God wasn't looking after him or anything like that. It's just the conditions were such that he was in the way of a bullet and the other person wasn't. That's, one set of conditions. But in terms of karmic cause and effect, then you have to look deeper. Because the fact that they're in a war and the bullets, and these are all conditions.
So there can
What
be
they
no
call
concept of
contributory
simply
conditions.
bad luck, bad luck.
Well, people call it that, bad luck, but oftentimes things when we say bad luck, what it really means is that we don't really know what the causes were.
That's true.
Okay, so let's I'll get back here and let's dedicate our. Oh, what did I do then? What did I do then? Sorry. I've got to go share the screen, come back here, share. Great. Is that okay for everyone? Okay. So today, for next week, we're going to be looking at this word, purification. What does it actually mean? And as you'll see next week, there are levels of purification that take place. And there are different things that can be purified. And then we'll look at these 4 opponent powers and go into them. And then on our 3rd and 4th week, we're going to use our knowledge, put it together, right, and try and apply it to our daily lives. So as we come to the end of our class, let's dedicate our merits, our efforts to engage in the class and understand this a little bit better. So join along with me. Due to the merits of our virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel, bodhicitta, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. And as long as space endures and as long as sentient beings abide, may I too remain to dispel the sorrows of the world. So we've come to the end. I hope this was useful. I want to really thank you for joining in. I mean, I love the dialogue and the questioning. It's great. And it's nice when we've got a smaller group who can actually do that. So please continue to do that. And I hope to see you next week. Until then, enjoy yourselves and be careful. Look after yourselves. Take whatever you can, your knowledge of karma, cause and effect, apply it and be happy.